Yo, I have some, I work with students, and I have some certain ethics that I have to adhere to, in order to to maintain my professional integrity. So I was talking to the student today that I just worked with, and he's a young so-called white kid. We work on reading. So we're reading a congressional session in 1978 or 1967, and it was talking about the constitutionality of the 14th Amendment. And I told him, we're still actually dealing with this stuff today. And I asked him if they talked about the election at school. And he told me that there were fights and arguments over it. I was like, wow. I was like, who was fighting? He said the teachers were very aggressive and argumentative towards the students. I was like, wow. I was like, wow, what was going on? And he said, because most of the students are Republican and the teachers are Democrat. And I was like, wow. I was like, really? He said, yeah. I was kind of shocked he said that. And he said, yeah, we're a red Republican state. And I said, okay. I said, that's interesting. And I asked him, what is a Republican? What does it mean to be a Republican? And, as I expected, he really didn't have an answer, because they don't teach people anything in school. They don't teach people anything in school. Instead they just arguing with students about their opinion when they're supposed to be actually helping inform that opinion. And so, I asked him, what is a democracy? And he couldn't answer it. And I would assume that he is a Republican, or he identifies as one. And I asked him, why is he a Republican? He said, that's a good question. I assume because we live in a republic. I said, then why do we have Democrats? He said, I don't know. I never thought about it. And I said, and that's the problem. People don't think about anything. They just kind of do things. And when we ended our session, I told him, people that work have money. People that do things have money. People that think have no money. But the thinkers and the doers have a lot of money. And I told them, always be a thinker and a doer. Don't be a doer and a thinker. Because when you're a doer and a thinker, the first thought you're going to think is, what the hell am I doing this for? And why am I doing it? Be a thinker. You have to understand what's going on. And if you understand, then you'll be able to properly articulate where you're coming from without being offensive. And you'll be also able to empathize with other people. But if you're just arguing based on emotion, it's just going to be a circle jerk, because you cannot beat emotion with logic and information. You just can't. But that is very unethical, to be arguing with students about their opinion. You don't do that. You spark dialogue. You let them debate. That's how you do it. You don't just shoot them down. Those teachers should be fired for that reason. Yeah, defund the department. In fact, don't defund it. Abolish it. Abolish the Department of Education and get more qualified teachers to teach. I mean, this is ridiculous.